On the first day, God created light. And then, the devil was born.
The first glimpse of Prashanth Neel's next movie, Dragon, has been released, and I want to say part 1 because this movie is being made in 2 parts, like all of Neel's movies except Ugram, which kind of got a thematic remake in Salaar part 1. But honestly, the glimpse of Dragon is really good.
But the real drama of the movie is we are attempting, and we probably will end up making one of the most patriotic movies ever seen.
It has a signature Prashanth Neel style, Junior NTR in a very new look, and Rukmani Vasan's dialogue is spine-chilling. But 2 big questions arise. Why is the color palette and the background score the same as Neel's previous films? And what is the connection between KGF, Salaar and Dragon? Stay tuned because the answer to both these questions is the same.
खुदा की एक मेहर है मुझ पर, ट्रिगर दबा के अफसोस नहीं करता.
Just from the first look, it appears Prashanth Neel has taken one of the biggest heroes of India and turned him into the most dangerous villain in Indian cinema history. Not a hero with a dark side, not an anti-hero, a villain. And the Dragon glimpse proves it. If you think you know what this movie is all about, trust me, you don't. Because honestly, every single frame of this glimpse is hiding something. And today, I'm breaking all of it down with several discussion topics which make Dragon one of the most anticipated movies of 2026.
सोते वक्त सपने में उनकी शक्ल नहीं आती जिनको मारा है, सिर्फ उनकी आती है जो अभी तक बचे हैं.
The very first thing the glimpse does is tell us everything about the context of the world. If you compare it with KGF and Salaar, the initial promo materials were all about the world. We saw the characters, we saw the conflict, but the context was missing.
You're goddamn right.
In the Dragon glimpse, we first hear the context, what happened that led to the villains in the story. Prashanth Neel spends 2 minutes building a documentary-style world. The British rule in India, the opium trade, the colonial imagery, British leaving India after independence, and then post-independence Mumbai and Kolkata, set in 1967. For the first 2 minutes, there is no hero, no protagonist, no NTR, nothing. This is the anti-teaser approach. Most Indian teasers open with the hero's entry, slow motion, BGM, crowd goes wild. Neel flips that completely. He treats a part 1 movie like it's already part 2. He skips the hero introduction entirely and says, let me show you the world first. Let me show you why this world needs destroying. And that, guys, is a masterful storytelling structure. Because honestly, when the British left India in 1947, they didn't just leave a country. They left behind the most profitable business in the world. And that business, opium, became the foundation of a criminal empire. The glimpse narrates this like a history lesson, but pay attention to what it's actually doing. It's creating the villain's origins before the hero even appears. This is something I absolutely loved because it breaks a template of how trailers are being edited. In a way, you can say Neel has broken his own template of trailer cuts. And Dragon's glimpse reminded me of the trailer of Dhurandhar Part 1, where each character was introduced, each featuring a memorable dialogue, and it was only after 3 minutes that we heard a dialogue from Ranveer Singh. Same approach, build the world, then introduce the force that disrupts it. Coming to the villains, Prashanth Neel introduces 5 distinct villain archetypes in rapid succession, each with their own visual identity, their own power structure. 91 deaths in tactical gear, Dada Sarkar in formal power suits, the opium lords in colonial era opulence. Every single one of them looks like they could carry their own movie. But here's where it gets insane. Among all these villains, there is one name that stands out, and it's not a villain's name you would expect. It's Luger, the assassin-in-chief played by Junior NTR. Now, Luger is not a random name. A Luger P08 is a German semi-automatic pistol from World War II. Precise, mechanical, cold and lethal. The name itself tells you this character is a weapon, not a person. He doesn't have emotions, he doesn't have a cause, he's an instrument of destruction. And Junior NTR is Luger, the same man who played Komaram Bhim, who made millions of people cry with his performance in RRR. The same man of masses is now the assassin-in-chief, walking over corpses, lean, frail, pale. He reportedly lost 15 kilos for this role. Not a muscular hero, a trained killer, reportedly shaped in Afghanistan. Prashanth Neel in a recent interview said,
We have cast the most expensive villain in the history of Indian cinema.
and he's playing the darkest character Neel has ever written. This is not a hero teaser. NTR is a villain of Dragon, at least for part 1. But wait, why would Prashanth Neel take one of the biggest mass stars in India and make him the villain? What's the play here? This brings us to the theme. Now pay attention to what the teaser is actually saying beneath the surface. Like all Neel's movies, someone is narrating. A sequence sequence of events, an emotional story, and the narration doesn't use a typical movie voiceover. It reads from the book of Genesis. On the first day, God created light. Day by day, the creation story unfolds. Land, sea, animals, humans, and then the seventh day, God rested, and then the devil was born. This is not just stylistic, this is structural. Prashanth Neel is telling you the philosophical DNA of this movie. The world was created by God and then corrupted by the devil. Luger is that devil. He is that corruption that enters after creation is complete. And then there is Rukmani Vasan's character. She's shown holding a baby, Madonna and child imagery, while reading from Genesis. In a movie filled with opium wars and assassins, we have a character embodying creation, motherhood, and scripture. This is not accidental. This is Neel setting up the ultimate contrast, creation versus destruction, the sacred versus the profane. Rukmani is the light that Luger was born out of darkness to destroy, or perhaps the light he was born out of darkness to protect. Because in Neel's universe, the villain always has a reason, the villain always has a wound, and that wound is usually tied to the one person who represents everything pure in their world. Absolute genius detailing. And if you think this is reading too much into it, go rewatch the teaser right now. The biblical framing is not subtle, it's the entire narrative spine. Coming to cinematography, which if you notice is fundamentally different from Prashanth Neel's previous work. In KGF, the camera was an event. It was frantic, explosive, constantly moving. Every shot was designed to pump adrenaline. In Salaar, it was intense but still action-driven. But in Dragon, the camera is lazy, and I don't mean it as a criticism, I mean it's deliberately patient. It sits, it watches, it lets the characters do the heavy lifting. The compositions are steadier, the movements are slower, the camera doesn't chase action, it observes character. This is Neel evolving from an event-based filmmaker to a character-driven storyteller. And that shift, it makes Dragon his most ambitious project yet, because he is no longer relying on spectacle to carry the film. He's trusting his ensemble and his writing to do the work. Bhuvan Gowda's cinematography reflects this perfectly. The desaturated color palette, washed out sepia for the historical context, deep cinematic blacks and blood reds for the underworld, the grain overlays, the slow reveals. This is a filmmaker who is confident enough to let silence do the talking. This brings us to the filmmaker's point of Dragon being the most patriotic film ever made. Dragon is set in post-1947 India. When the British left, they didn't just grant independence, they left behind a power vacuum. And into that vacuum stepped the opium trade, the trading companies, the criminal empires. The villains we see in this teaser are not random bad guys. They are products of the colonial exploitation. They are what happens when an occupying force leaves, but their economic structure remains. So now recontextualize. NTR as Luger, he is not just a villain for the sake of being dark and edgy. He's a product of this broken system. He was trained in Afghanistan, outside India, away from home. He became an assassin because the world that colonialism built made him one. And his journey into darkness, it's not nihilism, it's a setup. And here's a twist that seals it. Prashanth Neel in an interview said that Anil Kapoor's character, who is shown as a hero in the trailer, is actually one of the biggest villains.
Because Anil Kapoor in this teaser gets called, says like he's...
I'm calling him a hero because the whole world is calling him that, but he's our biggest villain.
So think about this. The character who looks like a hero is the villain, and the character who looks like a villain might actually be the hero in disguise. Neel is flipping the entire moral compass of the story. The surface tells you one thing, the structure tells you another. Because Prashant Neel's films always have a patriotic core. KGF was about a man who rises from the oppressed to challenge the system. Salaar was about loyalty and honor in a corrupt world. Dragon is structurally designed to follow the same emotional trajectory, but from the villain's perspective. Luger goes into darkness so that eventually he can emerge from it, and when he does, that's the patriotic payoff. That's the nationalistic moment that makes the entire theater erupt. This is why making NTR the villain is not a gamble, it's a calculated masterstroke. The bigger the fall, the bigger the rise. Ravi Basru's music, as always, controls the visuals. That deep, gravelly build-up during the Genesis narration, the way the music drops to complete silence before NTR's reveal, that silence is louder than any BGM could ever be. It's the sound of an entire theater holding its breath. Now coming to the questions I posed earlier. Why is the color palette and the background score the same as Neel's previous films? And what is the connection between KGF, Salaar and Dragon? The answer to both these questions is the same. Prashanth Neel has confirmed that KGF, Salaar and Dragon are part of a trilogy. But here's the catch. They are not a connected trilogy. They are more of a thematic trilogy. Think of it as the Dollars trilogy of Sergio Leone, where the three spaghetti western films, A Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More and The Good, Bad and the Ugly, follow the exploits of the same so-called man with no name portrayed by Clint Eastwood. Same actor, same genre, same visual language. language, but each film stands alone. In Neel's trilogy, the commonality is the genre, the color palette, and the music. The world is different, the characters are different, the time periods are also different, but the look and feel of these films have a common pattern. That's why the color palette feels familiar. That's why Ravi Basroor's score sounds similar. It's not repetition, it's a signature. Just like Leone's films had Ennio Morricone's music threading through all three, Neel's films have Basroor. It's not laziness, it's world building across an entire filmography. So for anyone wondering if Yash's Rocky Bhai will have a cameo in Dragon, it's not possible. Because in KGF, Rocky is born in 1951 and at the age of 10 comes to Bombay. So 1961, Dragon is set in 1967. At best, we can get a 16-year-old Rocky in Dragon. And Salaar is set in the events post 1985. So no overlap there whatsoever. These worlds don't collide, they just echo. I can't close this video without talking about the man himself, Prashanth Neel. It takes a lot of courage to make a film. Be it any director, filmmaking is a challenging job. And while directors are taking creative liberties and telling a story visually, finding something that works is hard. And critics can argue that Prashant can only make a KGF kind of film, a Salaar kind of film, but the underlying argument no one dares to make is that consistency mixed with conviction separates great directors from okay directors. Prashanth Neel knows the kind of movie he is making. His visual language, his grip on the drama part of the story, and the courage to make what he wants to make is very rare. I know I might be overselling the movie, but I know the majority of people fail to see the good aspects of Salaar. And Dragon, which to a layman might look like another KGF or Salaar, has layers of storytelling which are clearly visible in the glimpse. That is my take on the Dragon glimpse. The anti-teaser, the most expensive villain, the biblical undercurrent, and the patriotic twist hiding beneath all the darkness. But hey, these are just my theories and I want to hear from you guys. Do you think NTR is actually the villain or is Neel playing us? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already and check out our video on the sad reality of the Bollywood villain right here. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.